Welcome to Polaris-Live. This is your host, Sarwar Kashmeri. Thank you for joining us for today's discussion in our series focused on the US-China relationship and its global implications as seen through the eyes of experts from around the world. This user-supported channel is brought to you live in conjunction with the Foreign Policy Association of New York. If you have questions for today's guest, please feel free to submit them using the bar on the right side of the screen. After the live event, you can also listen to these programs on your favorite podcast platforms. Thank you for being part of this conversation. President Xi Jinping of China and Donald Trump of the United States are scheduled to meet in Beijing on 14-15 May. It is projected to be a critically important meeting given the stakes for the two most powerful countries in the world. To help us sort through these headlines, I'm joined today by one of the world's noted China historians, Professor Emerita Pamela Crossley of Dartmouth College. Professor Pamela Crossley is one of the world's leading historians of modern China, Northern Asia, and global history. She specializes in the history of China's last empire, the Qing, but has written books on early modern Chinese history, Central Asian history, and global history. Her work is widely published in both scholarly journals and in newspapers and magazines for the general public. Crossley is author of The Wobbling Pivot, China Since 1800, and Interpretive History, as well as influential studies of the Qing dynasty and leading textbooks in global history. Her forthcoming book is China's Global Empire, Qing, 1636-1912, Cambridge University Press. She's freshly retired from Dartmouth College. Welcome back to Polaris-Live, Dr. Crossley. It's so nice to have you with us again.
Can you hear me? I cannot hear you. I have no sound. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me?
I can hear you.
I can't hear you.
Okay.
I don't know what I'm trying to see if I can turn on captioning so that I can at least see what you're saying.
Okay.
When I first rejoined this, we were all talking.
Can you hear me now?
Then once the recording started,
can you hear me now?
Sound. I mean,
can you hear me now?
You.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do. Okay. I have an idea what you said.
Let me just say to everyone that we're sorry there were some technical glitches here, but the sound is now reconnected and the floor is Dr. Crossley's.
Okay, well, I was very curious about this trip that you recently took to China. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it. It's, as I understand, an unusual kind of trip. You went under your own power, and so you could set your own agenda. But through assiduous effort, you got access to some really important people in various sectors of Chinese decision-making. So, well, the first question I had was, I think probably everybody listening to this, they read about China, they know a lot of things about China, but on the basis of your trip, what would you add to the headlines that people can see everywhere, the most important thing that you would add to the headlines?
Well, that's a really important but really interesting question, Pamela, because, pardon me, excuse me, I went there under the guidance of the Consul General of China in New York. They opened some doors which are not normally open for people. And so I was able to do a lot of things that I really had wanted to do. And I mean, for instance, I was able to go and visit some of the think tanks. I was able to meet with some of the economists. I was able to go to the three leading universities. I was able to just walk around and absorb what China is. And so all of that added up to quite a fantastic 2 weeks. And perhaps the overriding impression I have of China, Pamela, is that it's a country that is vastly different from the one I visited quite some time back. And I found the people to be quite contented. I found them to be very modern. I found them to be friendly. I found them to be knowledgeable. And all in all, I came back with, left China with very, how shall I say, pleasant experiences and great impressions.
And I mean, my impression is the people you spoke to, you felt they could be very open. Did you? Would you go so far as to say candid?
Well, they seem that way, although you can always sense a veneer of protective layer that one finds. But that only happens if one gets into politics or the Chinese Communist Party, its role in the world. The rest of it, the other countries, relationships with other countries, the technical progress of China, all of that, there really is no issue, and they're very proud of it.
Okay, well, I mean, to me, it's really interesting that you felt, I mean, first of all, you got access to all these places, even though you were going on your own, and that you felt that a few subjects aside, people could be very candid with you, or they were open anyway. So the subjects that people maybe got cautious about are predictable,
Yes.
although very important, right? I mean, the government,
Yes.
that's sort of a big subject.
Yes, I'm interrupting you to say that one of the first things that surprised me was the amount of English that is used. Right from the time one gets off the airplane, right? I had thought for sure I'd be using my translate app from the iPhone and so on, but everything is in English and Mandarin. So I mean, you go there and it's like getting off at an airport in Holland or in Italy, accepting that the second language is Mandarin as opposed to Dutch or Italian. So that was one pleasant surprise. And the same thing I found on the roads while driving in a taxi, that the signs on the highway, and by the way, these are 4-lane highways in the city going each way, so 8-lane highways. But the signs there are in English as well as in Mandarin. And they look very much like signs on in the U.S. and Canadian highways, with exit signs and so on. The one interesting thing I noted was that at least half the cars are electric cars, and they have green license plates, and the rest of the plates are blue. This is in Beijing, so they give you a really good indication of how many cars are electric and how many are not. And if I might just add one more thing to give some color to what I'm saying, is I checked into the hotel, and the first thing I saw were 4 robots that did room service for them. So they simply put all the newspapers or groceries or whatever it is that's been ordered, and they just trot off, roll into an elevator and go up. And there was a time when I tried to get into the elevator at the same time as this robot, and the robot stood aside to let me in. And I thought to myself, my God, not only do they have robots, but they've told the robots to respect their elders. So all of that was, but that's the new China.
Okay. And you had previously been to China a while ago.
Yeah.
And if you had to just point to one thing that really seemed like the most important thing that had changed in that period, what just the most important, what do you think it'd be?
Wow. Uh, I would say the most difficult, I'm sorry, the most, the thing that I would pick up is the total transformation of the economy from a, shall I say, developing third country model to a gleaming digital economy that in many ways is far ahead of anything one sees in the United States or in Canada for that matter.
Mhm. Mhm. Well,
That is what I would,
okay.
and
Okay.
yeah. And I mean, I rode in this train, I travel frequently from New York to Washington by Amtrak,
Mm,
which rattles and takes God knows how many hours to get there. And I went from Shanghai to Beijing in this gleaming train that traveled at 350 kilometers an hour,
mhm,
where everything is digital, including, in fact, there is no ticket. You just show your passport or ID, and they remember the seat you're on, and they take you to it, and you get in, you go where you're going. So
mhm.
digital economy, the infrastructure, the change in the buildings, just a gleaming modern cityscape is what
Okay.
impressed me the most.
Okay. Material changes. Yeah.
Material changes, but also the economic changes. I mean, with the digital economy, comes digital payment systems, and so that the very little currency changes hands anymore, although
Yeah.
there is currency that's used, and much of the buying is done with apps, the iPhone apps, and so that's what I would point to. Uh,
Okay. Well, thanks. It was I know it was an interesting trip for you, and thanks for telling us about it. It's really quite interesting.
it's well, as a historian, you must have a little different insight into what's happened there, right? I mean, can you relate it back to? I mean, was China so different when the world trading system started? 300 years ago. I mean, was China's ships so far advanced? Their trading and their currencies, their barter. I mean, were they so far ahead then?
Well, 300 years ago, I would say yes. I mean, only just by way of context, I would just point out that for uh, 1,000 years before 300 years ago, China, well, South Asia, these were the most industrialized economies in the world. And as a consequence, China, when it surpassed South Asia in the 18th century, was then the leading sort of focus of trade in the world.
Hmm.
It was the most what I would say is the most influential economy, and I would say that that's the normal historical position for the Chinese economy. Most influential in the sense that it's the economy that other economies shape their priorities around in terms of trade and planning for the use of labor and uh, distribution of goods. I mean, it's about competition to get China into China, yes, but China has so many other ways now in which it is still, I would say, the most influential economy. And so, yes, so a return to that. I mean, really, this was true through the 19th century. It was really just sort of the first 2/3 of the 20th century that the Chinese position was a bit different. And a lot of that had to do with the rise of the United States. In the early part of the century, China's displaced as the most sort of dynamic and influential economy by the United States. But in the last third of the 20th century, the United States actually created the conditions that allowed the Chinese economy to begin to resume its historical role. And so the Chinese economy at this point does not quite occupy the percentage GDP of the globe that the 18th century Chinese economy did, but it's close. And the trajectory, right, is in the direction of the, yeah.
It's we have this summit meeting coming on in a 3 weeks or so between the presidents of the U.S. and China. And it's supposed to be a really critical meeting because the two are locked, daggers drawn now for so long. I mean, I'd like to draw upon your deep historian's knowledge of China and ask you, has there been another time that China has squared off, if you will, with a power that is as big as the U.S. is? Is this a first for China? And
well, no, I mean, Russia is the obvious answer. The empire of Catherine the Great. Well, Peter the Great, then on to Catherine the Great. This was always the empire in China for most of this period I'm speaking of. It was the Qing. They always squared off against the Russian Empire, which was much bigger. And very aggressive in terms of expanding towards the Pacific and then across the Pacific into the America. Yes, China has. I mean that's in a way, right? As a historian, I really shouldn't be answering in these terms because what we call China now, that's not what I'm talking about. In the past, Imperial China was, it was a thing. The Chinese republics in the 20th century, these are different entities. So in some ways, continuity is a little bit illusory. The PRC started in 1949. That's it. But the states based in China, have gone through passages like this before.
Okay, and the other thing that I've been meaning to ask you, Pamela, is that in these days, with all the changes that the U.S. has made, President Trump's policies of tariffs and so on, and more or less a drawing in of the action. America used to be the harbor of stability. America used to be, the open borders, the Washington Consensus, as they called it. But now China says, America's closing within itself, and China is the harbor of stability. We're the ones that are open to the world. What do you make of this? Well, do you think this will be a central issue at this summit meeting coming up in Beijing?
Well, it's not supposed to be. I mean, right? They have other things to talk about, the Straits of Hormuz and fentanyl, and a lot of other things that have been on the agenda between U.S. and China for a while. But actually, who can say? I mean, the current government, and that's in quotes, of the United States, as you say, is not associated with stability in any sense. And there has been a long-standing line of argument sponsored by the Chinese government that, yes, authoritarianism is more stable than democracy. And that's why it's better, right? And now, lo and behold, here we have these developments in the United States where all of a sudden the United States is really the fomenter of chaos all around the world. We have tremendous chaos in the United States. I mean, there's hardly any aspect of national life that is stable at this point. You know,
Right.
local life is okay, but national life, you know, we have this problem. So yes, that point made by the Chinese for a long time, that really, I think, was not credible at that time. Now suddenly it looks very different, because yes, for 2026, this is probably going to stay true. The United States is going to be a continuing source of instability, and chaos and disorganization, and China they see a role to play, and I think there's every indication that they will play it well. And so whether the meeting happens or it doesn't, I think it's more likely it will than it won't. The outcome is probably not really significant. I think the agenda for the PRC in relation to the U.S. is more or less set, and the United States agenda, you know, is unset and wouldn't make any sense if you heard what it is. So I think my assumption is that in one way or another, Chinese policymakers have written off the USA for 2026. It's just
Oh, really? Really?
well, the country's just offline. And it's not just in China that you see this. I think as a thought experiment, this is going around the world. That whether you're in Europe or you're in China or even in Japan, you have to think, okay, so the United States, suppose there's just no United States, it's out. The globe continues on its way without constantly having to calculate, what would the Americans do? What would the Americans think? Suppose it's just they're out, they're off, they're not here, and you can see the recalculations working in Canada, in Europe, everywhere, and the recalculations of how are we going to be dealing with China from now on? And I think this is true of Russia as well, because China and Russia for the past couple decades have been kind of artificially pushed together by basically American policies, which were consistent. And I think they have no real reason to stick together with the United States just basically offline. So I think there are recalculations there as well. So the meeting, it would be a good thing for the meeting to happen. Probably, you don't know, because every time the current president of the United States goes out, there's a chance of all kind of mishaps that, you know, who knows what will happen. But if it goes as planned, it would probably be a good thing, but not likely a very important thing. I think the Chinese calculations regarding the United States for the rest of this year are pretty much set.
Pamela, let me take a moment to remind viewers that Polaris-Live is commercial free and entirely viewer supported. So please support us by signing up to our mailing list at kashmiri.com and becoming a subscriber. There is a nominal subscription per year, but it'll also get you a one-page professionally curated executive summary of each program and invitations to special events that Polaris Live puts up. And again, just go to kashmiri.com. So Pamela, I wanted to ask you that roughly 70% of green technology, as it's called, is now made in China, right? And this causes concern amongst a lot of people around the world. My question is, as a historian, you know that 2-3 centuries ago, China perfected the art of manufacturing ceramics that could hold hot items. I saw that in Singapore when I was there, and they were ordered in Holland and other places, and they practically produced 90% of them. So should we really be concerned if they're now producing 80% of, let's say, green technology. I mean, so what? You just move on? What's
I, I mean, yeah, to me, it would be a so what, as long as you can buy it, right? I mean, this kind of specialized give and take between economies, it's a feature of the modern world, and in fact, there were antecedents of it in the pre-modern world. You know, some countries, some economies specialize in supplying goods to other economies, and some of them specialize in supplying goods back. So this is partly a question of the give and take. I mean, I don't see. I mean, I'm not sure what there would be to be concerned about. Some of these products, because they supply energy, would eventually have some kind of a security implications, but we should have the technologies to be able to vet these products to
right?
see that they're doing. I mean, that's a new thing for somebody else to do. That just creates more industries of a different kind. So I don't think, I mean, the trade deficit and, you know, is sort of connected to this idea that, well, oh, gee, what if China is ahead in so-called green technology? What if they are? I mean, your own economy has to have something to do, but whether another economy is excelling at one thing or another, it depends on the big picture. I wouldn't just fixate on one thing and say, oh, I'm very concerned about that.
Right.
And that goes for the trade deficit as well. You know, last year, U.S. Chinese imports to the U.S. would drop by what, about a third, and American exports to China dropped by about a quarter. But Chinese imports to the United States are creeping back up. Probably in what, 18 months, 2 years, they'll be back to where they were. But American exports to China continue to fall.
Hmm.
And that's because the disarray in the American economy and the, you know, sort of industrial environment it's not because of, you know, China being good at green technologies.
So, do you think that that the United States is at now a structural disadvantage as it heads into this summit meeting to talk about trade and security and so on, or do you think that that America still has the stature it did 2 years ago?
Well, no, I mean the signs are everywhere. No, America doesn't have the stature it had 2 years ago. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that 2 years from now it wouldn't actually, you know, sort of be back. You know, we're talking about China actually resuming its historical role.
Ah,
You know, this could always happen with the United States as well. But uh, what did you? Oh, the American stature. It just, I mean, I think in some ways it was inevitable because the post-World War II system that was basically created by the United States, and
right.
it did create the conditions that allowed the Chinese economy to, you know, resume a kind of global presence again. That uh what was I about to say? Um
That stature is transient, it comes and goes.
well, some things are transient, some things are not so transient, but that system that was created post World War II, it had a shelf life, and we have reached the end of that, and
Ah,
it would have, you know, begun to disintegrate no matter what. But I think that because of the current presentation of the US government, it has accelerated to some extent, certainly in Europe, this kind of recalibration of
right.
a relationship with the United States, which should happen. That is a healthy thing. It shouldn't happen under these circumstances, but it should happen anyway. And recalibrating relationships with the United States means simultaneously recalibrating relationships with China. And so again, I'm just saying there's a little window here. I mean, this is, to me, this is my main concern for the impact of this current global situation on China. there's a window here that everybody knows is finite, in which the U.S. is basically offline, and it's time for other countries, probably foremost China, to remake their own global presentation and their own role in the global. The situation outside for China should be stabilizing. In fact, I think it is true that China is playing a stabilizing role right now at this moment in relation to the Straits of Hormuz. They are playing a stabilizing role. But I think this could be destabilizing within China itself, because it's going to be it's not a big window. In terms of time, it's a smallish window, and so I think it provokes a certain amount of attempting to change the status of various sort of cliques and individuals within the party. Xi Jinping is dealing with that. He has been dealing with that anyway. I have a little bit of a fear that this agitation within the upper strata of the Chinese leadership could be aggravated by the fact that this window of opportunity has a certain sort of chronological limitation to it, if you see what I mean.
Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, Pamela. Perhaps, we have quite a bit of coverage of the meeting coming on over the next 2 weeks. But
Yes.
perhaps you can just follow the headlines for us, see what happens, and then maybe we'll have an opportunity to have the tail end remarks from you, like we had these remarks right at the beginning. And so I want to thank you for taking time to help our global audience think through these critical questions. I do hope you'll come back and see us again, Pamela.
Well, I know you've got a great series coming. I've seen your plans. They're fantastic guests you're going to have.
Thank you. We're going to try very hard, and hopefully fewer technical problems. But thank you also to our viewers from around the world. We'd like for you to join us again as we continue on with our series on U.S. and China and the impact of the relationship in the world. We'd like you to follow Polaris-Live, sign up, become a subscriber of Polaris-Live, and we hope to see you again very soon. Until then, goodbye.